A very good morning to our esteemed keynote speaker, distinguished panelist speakers, moderators, and ladies and gentlemen. We would like to thank each of you for joining this webinar and the Next Normal team under ASEAN Youth Organization. Welcomes you to the Next Normal webinar, Resilience in the Storms of Change. Before we proceed, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Shalini Jayakmaran, the head of Department of External Relations from the Next Normal project team, and now your beloved MC for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN Youth Organization is a platform which provides opportunities to our young leaders to embark independently for outreach in a designated region on the streamlines focused by government and non-government initiatives through AYO Ambassador Program channel. Each ambassador will be implementing their own brand project, and thus our director of the Next Normal, Hui Li Juan, hopes to use this project to advocate and promote 8th SDG, decent work and economic growth in Malaysia. On that note, we, the Next Normal team, are the second batch under the ASEAN Youth Organization Ambassador Program 2021. The Next Normal is a project started by a group of young people who hopes to represent a paradigm shift in a new era on the 8th Sustainable Development Goal, decent work and economic growth. Despite the fact that the Next Normal is led by youth, SDG 8 is not only for youth. SDG 8 is brought to all by youth. A gentle reminder to all participants, please make sure to fill the attendance form via the link provided in the chat box below. That being said, to kickstart our event today, we have our keynote speaker, Mr. Nicholas Kao. Mr. Nicholas is currently an economist at Khazanah Nasional Berhad, Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, where he is the head of the research division. He previously served as an economist in Malaysia's Economic Planning Unit, where he was directly involved in several national development projects. His research interests and intellectual passions are in the field of development economics, particularly related to the long-term persistence of historical events and cultural factors on economic and public policy outcomes today. Without any further delay, I invite Mr. Nicholas Kao to present his keynote speech. Mr. Nicholas, the floor is now yours.
Thank you for that, Shalini. So first of all, morning everybody, and I'd just like to thank the ASEAN Youth Organization Ambassador Program for inviting me to be with all of you today. It's a privilege for me, and I hope to be able to share some of my thoughts with you, and hope that it makes sense as you go about with today's program. Right, so I'll get right into it. And the thing that the organizers are trying to focus on is the Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Now, we're talking about this in the context of the theme for your webinar today, which is the next normal. But I guess the question is, what does it really mean to be normal, right? So, over the past 2 years since the pandemic started, people have asked me quite a bit, including on public forums such as this, so Nick, when do you think we can go back to normal? And what they really mean by this is, can we go back to how things were in 2019? But, really, do we really want to go back to 2019? So when we stop and think about it, right? Think about the world as it were in 2019. Is that the kind of world we want to go back to? And with all the inequalities and with all the injustices and with everything that's wrong with it, right? And what we see is that the pandemic has really highlighted the existing fissures we have in society and exacerbated them. And let me start, I have 3 points to make today. The first one I'm going to make is on the role of decent work. And when we look at what the pandemic has shown us, right, it's shown us that workforces like the Malaysian workforce in the context of our economy are particularly vulnerable to a pandemic like COVID. So COVID has shown how our workforce and firms are so vulnerable to the pandemic But this also means that the country is more vulnerable not only to shocks like the pandemics, but any shocks that halt production. Think of climate change effects such as floods, or even in a more extreme scenario, wars, which we can't completely rule out these days because of global geopolitics, right? And the underlying reason behind Malaysia's vulnerability to a halt in production, via our MCOs and all of that, is because large chunks of the jobs that Malaysia has do not lend themselves to the possibility of working from home. How many of our jobs in Malaysia are actually adaptable or amenable to working from home? A group of economists at the World Bank, including a friend of mine, Dani Garrote Sanchez, tried to answer this question globally. So in July 2020, they found in a study that in high-income countries, 1 of every 3 jobs is amenable to home-based work, while in low-income countries, only 1 of every 26 jobs can be done at home. Think about that, right? 1 in 3 in high-income countries versus 1 in 26. These kind of jobs, they call it telecommutable jobs, are highly unequally distributed across space, not only across countries, but also within countries. And certainly they are less prevalent in lagging regions. And in August 2020, a researcher at the University of St. Gallen demonstrated that actually the decline in employment from lockdowns are hardest on middle income nations like Malaysia. So according to the authors, right, while workers in rich countries have higher ability to work from home, which is what the World Bank study said, poor countries also actually can work from home, also have the ability to work. They can't work from home, but they have to work because they concentrate the employment and value added in essential sectors like agriculture that are not shut down. Middle income countries like Malaysia feature large employment shares in non-essential sectors and relatively low work from home ability. Malaysia's largest services sector, services is about 60+% of the economy, has jobs in wholesale, retail, F&B accommodation. That is our largest subsector for jobs in the country, as well as a high reliance on tourism jobs. All of these form an employment recipe that features exactly what the study points out: relatively large employment in non-essential sectors with relatively low work from home ability. So think about that, right? So if we can't work from home and we can't go to work, that's why we're especially vulnerable. And this leads me to point 2, which means actually what we need is to change our economic structure. Malaysia has come a long way over the past few decades by growing off the back of low-cost competitiveness, which then is typically reflected by low wages. This is bolstered by the fact that we import large numbers of foreign workers who typically work in jobs that don't really pay very much, right? And you're all in university, and I'm sure you've heard people go on and on about how we need to improve our education system and create better graduates. But in economics, that is just the supply of labor, right? Even if the labor supply is high quality, but labor demand, the kind of jobs that require high quality labor is weak, we're never ever going to have decent work. We need to think about how we can have the kind of economic policy that really moves us towards creating more productive jobs at a wide scale. In other words, how can we help the economy move towards one that competes based on a low-cost structure and therefore compete with other countries such as Vietnam, Bangladesh, and China in the 2000s on such a basis, towards one which is more knowledge-driven, more technology-driven, trying to innovate and really drive change at the world production technology frontier. Because otherwise, you're just a price taker, right? So the prices are set in international trade, and all you do is just take those prices as opposed to making your own prices. Which then leads me to my final point. If we are going to create more productive jobs at a wide scale, we also need to think what that means for our technology policy, whether it's in Malaysia or any of the other ASEAN countries or any country we're in, right? There's an economist, Len Pritchard, who used to be at Harvard and Oxford, who talked about, does it make sense to have automated parking collection in countries like Uganda? So, automated parking, you go to the mall, you take a ticket, and then later you pay at the machine and you leave, right? But imagine you're in Uganda and you're at the airport, and there's an automated parking attendant, right? Now, in a country where labor is very, very plentiful, right? There's a lot of people willing to work. Why are you taking away a job that really these folks can do? So what is the development benefit really of having automated parking in a country where labor is plentiful, right? So the point I'm trying to make, and the point that Len is trying to make is, when we think of technology, we shouldn't think of it as some exogenous, unstoppable kind of force. We have the ability to choose the kind of technology we want. So when we talk about automation and innovation and buzzwords like the fourth industrial revolution, which, by the way, I think is just a buzzword, we tend to talk about these smart machines replacing people to increase firm productivity. And I think that's a mistake. We really shouldn't be thinking about labor replacing productivity. We should really try and think about how to increase firm productivity by increasing people productivity. So what kind of technology augments but doesn't necessarily replace people? So if you think about somebody who, let's say in the past, right, easy example, is somebody who used to handwrite everything or maybe even typewrite stuff, and now they can use the computer. That technology has just made them more productive. It didn't need to replace them. And so, when countries or think about automation technology, let's not think of it as something that can't be stopped or there's something that just is thrust upon us and we just have to deal with it. No, we can choose the kind of technology we want. And if we're going to have what SDG 8 asks for, which is inclusive sustainable economic growth via full and productive employment and decent work for all, what really matters is the kind of technology we choose as well. So therefore, we need to ask what kind of technology augments but doesn't replace people. And these are the kind of technologies we should prioritize. And in fact, MIT studies showed that productivity in recent years actually hasn't increased by much, despite the fact that we seem to be in this technological, in an era with very rapid technological growth. Well, but why? So if the machines are more productive but people are not, is there a natural limit to how far we can go? So let's try to be a bit more imaginative when we think about the kind of technology policy we need for decent work. So, I have these 3 points, right? The first is, Malaysia, given its job structure, is particularly vulnerable to pandemics and other production stopping kind of crisis. Number 2, this means that, rather than blame people or whatever, what we need to do from a policy point of view is to really change your economic structure to transform into something which really has higher value added jobs that allows more flexibility and adaptability across the country. And this is, in line with standard evolution, right? Survival of the fittest, where fittest in this case is not the strongest or whatever, it's the most adaptable. And therefore, the third, as we think about creating these kind of jobs, let's think about the kind of technology we want as well, because we can't move forward with economic growth without talking about technology. But we have to recognize that technology is something we can choose. So, we don't have to choose technology or automation that replaces people. We can choose ones that augments people to increase their productivity. So, as you go through the rest of the day, think about what you can do to help us choose. We are not at the mercy of some exogenous or incredible force of technological change that just bypasses us. We should be able to choose, and we need to think about what is best for people, because ultimately that's all there is, right? A lot of things are imaginary, people are real. So let's choose. And, in whatever the next normal might be, it's one where, we should put people more at the front of what we try to do and have a set of policies, including technology policy, which is more people-centric. So with that, I'll stop here. And I would just like to thank the ASEAN Youth Organization Ambassador Program again for inviting me to speak to you. It's been a pleasure. And I wish you all the very best with the rest of your webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that riveting speech, Mr. Nicholas Carl. As always, it was insightful as ever. We will take your teaching to heart for a better Malaysia. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first session of the next normal webinar, namely Youth Entrepreneurship in the Green Economy. Profit and environment are ally, not enemy. The main takeaway key points for this session would be focused on the importance of green economy, youth entrepreneurship, sustainable development in rural areas, and the challenges in transforming Malaysia's current economy. Now for this session, we have Mr. Yohendra Nadar Aruldevan as our moderator and Ms. Regine Chu, Mr. Noh Shaiwan, and Dr. Chan Ho Yen as our speakers panelists. Before we begin, allow me to give a brief introduction on our moderator and speaker panelists. Our moderator, Mr. Yohendra Nadar Arudevan, is a final year economics undergraduate at the Faculty of Business and Economics, University of Malaya. He is the former president of the University of Malaya Economic Society, PECUMA, and is currently a research intern in Institute of Strategic and Malaysia Studies. Now, our speaker panelist, Ms. Regine Chu, is an experienced entrepreneur with a demonstrated history of business experience in the solar, green energy, and green building industry, who has accomplished in roofing industry, solar industry, renewable energy, business planning, finance, sales, and engineering. Mr. Noshaiwan bin Ismail is a solar entrepreneur and the founder of Sunprop Solar. With 10 years of experience in tech startup, commercialization, solar application, and solar innovations, who has completed 100 solar projects and served 1,250 beneficiaries. Dr. Chan Ho Yen is an energy specialist and a freelance researcher at the Invite Green Consultancy, working on energy and climate change projects. Without any delay, I will now pass the floor to the moderator, Mr. Yohendran, to kickstart the first session.
Thank you, Shalini, for the very brief introduction about the panel and myself as the moderator for the first session. Very good morning, everyone. I'm Yohin, and I'll be a moderator for today's first session. Before we start the session today, let me just give you all another gentle reminder to all the attendees. Kindly mute yourself at all times to minimize disruption to the flow of this session. Nevertheless, feel free to drop your questions in the Zoom chat box, and I will try to post them to our speakers during the Q&A session. With that said, let me introduce all of you to the main topic of session today: youth entrepreneurship in the green economy. Profit and environment are ally, not enemy. Now, with rising vaccination rates and the gradual reopening of international borders, nations across the globe, including Malaysia, have begun pushing for a more sustainable and green post-COVID-19 economic recovery. At the conclusion of the recent 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, more commonly referred to as COP26, many countries have pledged to achieve more ambitious targets. Now, to achieve these goals, we need more innovative and novel solutions to the various environmental and sustainability issues out there. Concurrently, there are also expectations for entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, to play a more pivotal role in our transition to a greener economy. But why must they do this, and how can they do this right? To answer the first question and kick off today's discussion, allow me to invite Dr. Hoyen to deliver a brief presentation on climate change and the green economy with the latest figures and trends. Dr. Hoyen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Johan, but I have to ask the committee so that you allow me to share screen.
Dr. Hoyen, the host is from AYO. I have been contacting them to let them to make you as co-host to share the screen. Give me a sec. I'm sorry about that.
When it's ready, can you please let me know in case there's no notification appear here?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Right. Thank you, Dr. Hoyen.
Yeah, just bear with us, guys, for a few minutes as we try to sort out this technical glitch.
I'm not quite sure that for all of you, the participants, the youth, that the level of your knowledge on climate change. So I've just thought that maybe this is a very good opportunity for me to share with you the basic knowledge of, between energy and climate change, so that perhaps you could appreciate more and, take it as an urgent and emergency issue right now that happening around the world, even though Malaysia seems like very quiet on this issue. And committee, is that ready? It's like quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Yep, is it all sorted out? Miss Shalini?
Shall I send you the slide instead? Can you let me know whether it's that technical problem or?
Hi, Dr. Ho Yen. I think the committee is now setting the co-hosting. Maybe we can share in for you instead. And after you have become the co-host, we'll notify you. And if you want to share screen after that, you can do so lah. Is it okay?
Who should I send to?
I'll drop you my email.
Alini or who?
I've already shared
Oh,
the email slides to the group, Dr. Hoyen. So
Come again.
I've already shared your slide to them, so they could share your slides. You know what?
You mean they can screen it themselves, is it? So I can just proceed by saying like now it's like 1 slide 2 like this. Is that what you mean? Okay, but this is PDF, right? So of course, if possible, I prefer the PowerPoint because there's animation. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, Dr. Ho Yen. Give us a second. We'll sort this problem.
Okay, I think we shouldn't waste the time. Why not you just screen the PDF first? And then, you know, I hope the IT, you can solve it. All right, okay, so sorry everyone. So this is the one that I've just mentioned. I thought I would like to introduce about energy and climate nexus. Next, please. Next. So, okay, so in order to understand the climate change, of course, the basic is all about the greenhouse effect. And I know maybe you all still remember what we have studied during our school time. If not, then bear with me for the next couple of slides. So we all know that our Earth is covered by the atmosphere, and without atmosphere, the Earth, it will be too cold for human being or all the living being to live on the planet. So this atmosphere is basically a blanket. And what happened in between is that when we have the radiation shining through the atmosphere to the Earth, 23% of them will be absorbed in the atmosphere, 48% absorbed at the Earth's surface, and another 29% reflected. And of course, by nature, the atmosphere, we have the GHG inside, you know, within the atmosphere. And what happened when the reflection, you know, hits the GHG? The GHG function as like absorb even more heat and reflected back, you know, re-emitted back to the Earth's surface, and then it will keep the Earth warm. And of course, some of them will get through the GHG emission, and then it will be the so-called net emission to the space. And in case you have no idea what are those greenhouse gases, have a look on the right-hand side, and the slide will be shared with you after the event. So I will not go through one by one. Next, please. Okay, so and what happened, that is by nature, the previous one is by nature. And what happened if we have the human activity that we call anthropogenic activities? And when we have this, for example, we have built more and more power station, and will emit more and more GHG emission. And you know, by nature, there's already the GHG emission there. But because of the human activity, we have more and more GHG emission that trap in between the Earth and also the atmosphere, and then it will absorb more heat. Remember, I showed just now that the GHG will actually make it re-emitted back to the Earth, and so the Earth become warm, and that is how the global warming happened. Next, please. So like I said, that the global average temperature is it will depend on the thickness of the blanket. So because of the GHG emission concentration, yeah. So, and then we have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If this is not familiar, it's like alien terms for you. You can Google it later on. All the young people, you know better than me, yeah, how to Google. So according to them, the scientists found that for the future climate-related risk, if exceed 2 degrees Celsius by 2100 year, then some impacts may be long-lasting or irreversible, such as the loss of some ecosystem. And this is on very high confidence, very, very, very likely to happen. And the best is to stabilize the warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And this whole thing is also the Paris Agreement temperature goal. And again, if you have no idea what is Paris Agreement, please go and Google. And I would say that if you didn't know like what is Paris Agreement, is equals to you didn't know who is BTS, who is Blackpink. So make sure you are trendy enough. And so next is what happened right now. The previous one is the scientists told us what would happen, and what is happening right now. The UNEP Emission Gap Report 2021 told us that the world right now is still heading for a temperature rise that exceeds 2.7 degrees Celsius in this century if we continue like this. And if you want to get a whole idea for infographic, if the report is too long for you, this is the link. Next, please. Otherwise, bear with me for the next couple of slides. What are those different when we talk about the temperature rise? So, like what I have just mentioned, the IPCC and the Paris Agreement goal is to stay between 1.5 degree if possible. That's the best way. That's the most ideal one. Otherwise, the minimum that we have to limit the warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And the next one, the 3 degree, is where are we heading to? Next. Next. Okay. So what are those different? You can, if to you like 1.5 to 2 is just 0.5 degrees Celsius, 2 to 3 is just 1 degree Celsius. But look at the impact, it's very different. For example, for the 1.5 degrees Celsius is 3% probability that the ice-free eclipse. And then for the middle one, the 2 degree, it increase becomes 16. And not to say the 3 degrees Celsius is 63%. Next. And likewise, the 1.5, we will have 4% of normal losing half their habitat, and compared to if we have 4.5 degrees Celsius, it will have 41% that we will losing the habitat. Next, please. And how about drought? 1.5 degree, we will have 2 months average length of drought, and compared to the 3 degrees Celsius, we will have 10 months. Can you imagine? A year is only 12 months, and we have 10 months long for the drought. What would happen next? Next slide. Look at here. This is like, I compile like what would happen in this region, the ASEAN, so that that, it's not that global average, but what will happen right now, our home or our neighbor. And why do I want to stress on regional? Imagine all your food import from where? The rice. It's not all from Malaysia. Even if Malaysia is safe, we export or we import all around our neighboring country, most of them. And you see, for the 1.5 degree increase, we will have the risk for increased flooding, precipitation, and the crop yield reduction. All these are the impact. And you compare 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius, it would be like the risk will be increasing. And that is actually food security. It will affect the food security, which is the basic for human being to live. Next. So now I would like to introduce why energy sector, why we talk about carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality, or we call it like net zero carbon dioxide emission, it can be by the most general and the most easier way for me to introduce to you is the balance between the emitting carbon and absorbed carbon emission from the carbon sink. Carbon sink include, like by nature, is forest, soil, and oceans. And the net emission emit to the atmosphere is the net. And we are looking for the net zero, meaning that the net emission emit to the atmosphere is become zero. So it cancels off each other, the offset. And of course, because of the thickness of the blanket, the more emission that we emit, we require more the absorption capability. So, but then bear in mind, nature has limitation to absorb the heat. Trees will not grow over the night. Even you plant tree a lot, like start from today, how many years only you can get a tree? And different trees and different age of the trees, they will absorb different level concentration of the CO2. And so reduce the emission is critical. Don't always only depends on planting trees, yeah, because it takes time and the crisis is emergency. No, it's okay. Next. Okay. And why energy? Look at here. This is the global greenhouse gas emission, and it compiled according to the sources. The orange color is from the fossil fuel, and you can see that from the fossil fuel, which is the energy sector, is the dominant. That's why energy sector matters. Next. And in order to give an idea, what is the emission from Malaysia and compared to the neighbor, if I didn't compare with the neighboring country, you probably do not have idea whether it's a lot or not. So these are all the neighboring countries, the ASEAN, that we all are developing country except Singapore. So look at that. Brunei is the highest, probably because of, they are the oil and natural gas producer and they have less renewable energy relatively. But look at Malaysia. Malaysia is the highest after Brunei. So young people here, pay attention on that and if possible, make a change. Next. So this is to introduce to you like, okay, why, to let you know that the different types of fossil fuel, it will emit different concentration of the CO2 emission. So first, which is the dominant fuel in the total primary energy supply, the TPES? You can see that is the yellow color is the oil, but look at the in terms of emission, the CO2 emission is actually the orange color coal, and that is why we always label coal as the dirtiest fossil fuel. And look at the renewable energy, is 19% in the TPES, but only 1% for the emission. So that is the cleanest. Next. And then in terms of the emission by fuel types, so also by countries, and you can see from Malaysia, which I make the blue box down there at the table is clearer. So for Malaysia, mainly is the coal and oil, and where these fuels go to. So for the coal, we use it mainly for the power generation. For the oil, of course, is transport, and gas is also power generation. And so decarbonizing the power generation system is critical. And bear in mind, now everyone is talking about the EV, electrical vehicles. And when we have those EVs, have to think about where are the charging sources, like what are those energy sources? If it would be like the power generation is dominant by the coal, it's actually the EV is powered by coal. So it's not really that clean. So at the end, we still have to decarbonize the power generation system in order to make it really a green transport system. And so this is how it links all the energy climate nexus. Next. So this is also one of the example, like what, since you're quite a lot of you in the finance background. So this is just to give you an idea. The bank appetite nowadays. So a lot of banks around the world, they already commit to sustainability. For example, you know, the green color is what they committed for the sustainability for the next future couple of years. And then for the orange color is what they have already invested in the past for the fossil fuel. And you can see here from Citigroup, you know, like the green color is actually dominant more than the orange color, which is the fossil fuel. And throughout the whole chart, which I selected, you know, the top 10 for the main fossil fuel banks that support the fossil fuels banks, most of them is already moving towards the green. So this is also where our economy heading to in the future. If in future investment, green is definitely will be seen as more profitable compared to the fossil fuel. Next. Next. Okay. So may I ask how long do I have? Do I still have time?
Yep, Dr. Huynh, I think you can finish it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So right now, so what I'm trying to tell is we have to reduce the emission from the power sector, and I would say that I would invite everyone to consider no more new coal power plant, and if possible, we install carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and consider the risk of the stranded asset if we keep on build, you know, the fossil fuel power plant. And then we have to consider also the just transition, the fairness of the energy transition, consider the ESG responsibilities, and also the coal financial risk in the future. Like I have shown just now, the bank is now no more, it's not no more, but reducing their investment in the fossil fuel. And why I stress on the coal, remember, coal is one of the major energy sources for Malaysia. Yeah. And consider the climate vulnerability, the energy system have to be resilient to climate change. Next. So in order to decarbonize the power sector, three parties, I would say, that are very important. The scientists, the government agency, and also the businesses have to work together. And like, for example, for the science, we have to develop the technology, and then the government have to implement the appropriate policy so they can scale up the technology, and business would be selling the technology. And so we will need more RE, of course, in order to decarbonize the power generation, and then also the high RE integration. But currently the challenges is the grid challenges, which I think later on the other two speakers know better than me. And one of the opportunity is decentralized RE, for example, the microgrid, community-based for the rural area, especially, or the P2P system, peer-to-peer energy trading, and market-based mechanism, for example, renewable energy certificate, or the carbon pricing, which might sound alien to you, but I cannot cover everything in short time. But just try to Google yourself, or otherwise I have talked to the committee. If you are really interested, I can give you another lesson which is focused on the climate change. Just give feedback to the committee. And the next possibility, the next that we can, you know, put on the R&D is the battery and energy storage, which is still very expensive right now. And the other potential energy is the green hydrogen, which Sarawak has the huge potential. Next. So what happened look at the right-hand side first because I do not have animation. So look at the right-hand side first. This is what happening in 2020. In ASEAN, this is ASEAN, I'm talking about ASEAN, our region. The temperature rise is 1.27 degrees Celsius, in 2020. And imagine in 2040, imagine 2050, what if we more than 2 degrees Celsius? Remember the impact I have shared just now. That is your life or your children in the future. So choose the future that we want. Next. Yeah. So this is also one of the study, unfortunately, because there's animation effect, so it actually covers it. So there's one study by the Climate Central that the results show that the land projected to be lower than the elevation of an average annual flood level in 2020 found that Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand are among countries that could be threatened by permanent inundation by 2100. What it means is that permanently, flooded. Yeah. So for the picture, the right-hand side, the wildfire is happened in Greece, and then for the flood is actually in China. In Malaysia, we are still safe, but it doesn't mean that it will not happen one day. But then the good thing is, in the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity, like the Albert Einstein said. So we can take action right now, and it's possible to change. Next. So for what we can learn from the pandemic is that COVID-19 is an wake-up call. So non-human species can pass their diseases on to people. And there's actually a reminder that the link between human and the nature ecosystem. Act now before it's too late, because the IPCC scientists always remind us that this could be the last chance for us to stop the irreversible ecosystem loss. And then what I will say is humanity will bring us together. Next. So with that, thank you. And thanks for bearing with me and for the technical error.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Hoyen, for the very informative presentation on a range of terms. I would call them buzzwords as well, since we often use them, but we don't really have that much of a deep understanding on what these terms actually mean. And yes, despite the technical glitch, I think you still delivered a spot-on presentation. And I'll definitely circle back to you eventually to elaborate on some aspects of your presentation. But now I invite the other two panelists, both entrepreneurs, to briefly share their thoughts on the presentation and also introduce their green businesses to us. Regine, would you like to go first?
Hello, hi. Thank you, Dr. Hoyen, and yeah, thank you, moderator. Yohendran, right? Yes. Okay. Yeah. That was a very informative sharing by Dr. Hoyen. So just kind of related to what we are doing in the solar energy. So basically we play the role in decarbonization, the power system. Yeah, of course, by large and whole. So we played a part in providing the solar energy systems, being on the rooftop, on the ground as a car park, and also on this as a RC rooftop, metal roof, so building integrated in a sense. Yeah. So basically, I resonate with what Dr. Hoyen have shared. So we have been pretty much living in an era of where the power generation is dominated by the coal and gas as the generation source. So we have been releasing the carbon dioxide when these fossil fuels, coal and gas, are burned to produce electricity, be it to cool buildings or to power up machines, yeah, just the moment you turn on your electricity, so it's as much as like 70% is coming from the coal and gas. Yeah, because in our current scenario, we are still is improving on the electricity mix, whereby in terms of the renewables energy, maybe they are largely coming from the large hydro. So like solar energy is still on a very low single-digit percentage on the overall electricity mix in the power generation. Yeah. So that is how we come all the way. I've been in this business for more than 10 years. So that was in line with the government promotion for this solar energy. It was started from as early as like 2009. But there were government trying to implement the first solar program is the feed-in tariff. And then, of course, that has been ended. And now we are moving to this net energy metering program. So what can be done here is you generate solar energy for your own consumption. So basically the offset the energy from the coal and gas generation. And that's how we contribute and play and help businesses and even individuals to actually go for a lower carbon energy usage. Yeah. So is that clear of my sharing?
Yep, I think that's pretty succinct, I would say, about your business.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
you can imagine those on the rooftops, you see a lot of panels. So that kind of business we're in. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I think at this moment we can also hear from Shahiwan as well on his business, since I believe it's also pretty similar to what you're doing, Regine. So would you like to go next, Shahiwan?
Yep. Thank you, Johendran, Ms. Regine, Dr. Hoyan. It's my honor to be here, to be invited, and thank you again for Asian Youth Organization. First thing first, about presentation by Dr. Hoyan. It was really refreshing because we need the numbers, we need the figures to show it is happening. It's not like it's going to happen, it is happening. And I think for youth, it is more important because if you look at the timeline, actually the youth and the generation after the youth are actually the one gonna experience the impact the most. Okay, for policymakers, generation right now, they are like expecting or just planning for the next generation, but the most impactful generation will be current youth, and I think the generation after them. And then regarding the business, we at Sunground Solar, we are focusing in off-grid solar energy system. So basically in solar energy, we have two main subsectors, which is grid connected. In short, if you look at the solar farm, any solar panel on the building, it is like grid connected, where the place have access to grid, TNB. But we are focusing on the other side, the off-grid, in places without access to the electricity. So most of our customers will be from agriculture, resorts, and also we do our social initiative for off-grid community. So in Malaysia, we have three classes of off-grid community. The first one will be, of course, in Sabah, Sarawak. The second one will be rural in Semenanjung in Peninsula, mostly orang asli and living in the rural area. The cause of the off-grid issue will be topography. Maybe they live in jungles, mountains, and you need to cross river and whatnot. And then last but not least, the last group will be beneficiaries, special case. It doesn't have to be very deep in the rural area. We have cases in Nilai, Lendu, in Batanggali, where people have been living for 20 years without access to electricity. They are using candle, lantern, torchlight, for light source at night. So that's how critical this electrification issue is. That will be all.
All right, thank you, Shahiwan, for sharing more about what your business is all about as well. And I think this is a good time to circle back to Dr. Hoyen, since you did mention how it has to be an effort by a few stakeholders. So particularly since we're talking about entrepreneurs today, what do you think are the role of green entrepreneurs in building a more sustainable future for Malaysia?
All right. To me, I would not just focus on the green entrepreneur, but rather all kind of businesses, you know. I mean, different, all kind of economy sectors. So imagine if going green becomes one of the priority of all the businesses, eventually green is not going to be a desire, wish or dream, but it will be a habit or a culture that is very important. That's a change. And for example, you know, okay, when we talk about, you know, you are running a business, your enterprise, so you can set through the procurement that only establish business relationship with those green practitioners. Then perhaps we'll create, you know, green market, because it is a basic requirement anyway, if you want to get business with me. And, you know, another thing is like set internal targets for your own enterprise for energy reduction, for example, or, you know, like you aim for by when you will fully powered by renewable energy, or by when you're going to achieve net zero, or other environmental related target. That would be a clear direction for an institution to move towards more green or more sustainable businesses, or I would prefer to say low carbon. Yeah, and then when the green market is there, the cost will be reduced and consumers will appreciate more green products. And if the price is compatible with the conventional products, then people will buy it, you know. And that's why we need to inspire people like you, the young generation, to create the change. And so slowly, you know, make the green become something common, but not just like, you know, a dream.
All right, thanks, Dr. Hoyen. I think you have explained the significant role of entrepreneurs, not just green entrepreneurs, in terms of how they can make the whole concept of starting a green business as a common thing. It doesn't need to be something you know, uncommon. And I think on that note, perhaps Regine, maybe you could share with us on the possible entrepreneurial opportunities within the green economy in Malaysia.
Yeah, okay. So in regards to this, I will say that maybe I can give some quotes. Recently, like Standard Chartered has actually saying that there's a potential as much as 65 billion USD. There's an export revenue at risk for companies or that doesn't go forward with this net zero transition. So I think these figures, I believe it poses as a you can translate it as a business opportunities, whereas the risk, there's opportunities. Like in the saying, there's a risk and in every opportunities. So being entrepreneur, or maybe to have an entrepreneur mindset, maybe I say it that way. So you can actually tap or explore what are the roles and possible business you know, positions that you can play along the value chain, especially in the green economy, green energy industry. So for example, like in my industry, it's like the green energy industry. So it actually it has statistics shows that it generates more you know, job opportunities versus the centralized power system. With a decentralized, we need a lot of manpower, even as this components or suppliers. So depending on which particular segment that you are actually interested in, I would say to venture in entrepreneur and the most important, you must have the interest and the passion to actually drive you and sustain along the way. Yeah. So maybe my statement here is a bit general because I believe most of us participants more to the finance background, I heard. So it's actually to see where is the opportunities to play along the value chain. You can go from suppliers, service providers, and I mean more to the service-oriented businesses. The activities is actually available. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to add, Regine?
Possible entrepreneur opportunities within a green economy. Of course, not only green energy, you are talking about like agriculture, you can go into the consultancy. Yeah, so there are so many ways. Yeah.
So I think, just to summarize what you shared earlier, opportunities are there. It's a matter of what sort of opportunities you're looking for. So as you had mentioned, it can be not directly related to like starting a business itself, but it can also be in consultancy, like you said, farming, agriculture as well. So I think that gives a range of options for our youth today when they think about dabbling into something that's more green. And I think with that, I think it's a good time for us to ask Shahiwan on opportunities for the rural youth, since I'm aware that you have quite a number of experience with sustainable development projects in rural areas, and as you had mentioned earlier, with the electrification project of the Orang Asli community. So maybe you can share on that.
Right. So first thing first, I mean, let me comment on the green business, green economy. I think the way that we should look at it, you don't have to be, I mean, like, you don't have to really have green product first to be in the green business. Okay, any business, any economy, you can make it green. So that's the way you should look at it. I give you a very basic example. I mean, anybody selling nasi lemak, right? So nasi lemak, you can make it greener. So it shouldn't be green. Green is not the product. Green is the way of doing things. And I believe you cannot sell the greenness of that thing. It should be on its own. Green is just an add-on. If people will like to buy it because of the green, it's okay. But the product on its own, it will sell what it's supposed to do. Okay, you are not selling extra for extra price because it's green. I mean, like, give you okay, example back nasi lemak, right? Nasi lemak, you use container, polystyrene, paper box and whatnot. The price will be this much. But if you can work out on somehow getting banana leaves to sell in nasi lemak, it's actually can make it cheaper and can make it greener. So green is not the because why I'm telling you this, because we have been on that path. We try to sell the green thing, but trust me, the market is actually do not really care that much. It is the business operators, enterprise responsibility to make it their whatever product, services green enough for them. And it makes sense for the market to purchase it. Not just because of the green, you cannot tell you need, because this product is green, you need to pay more 50%. Some of the customer might have that concern, but it will be very tough path to choose. All right, and then on your question on the rural entrepreneurship activities, the trend is rural youth don't want to be rural youth anymore. Everybody wants to go to migrate to city to work, or gig jobs, Grab, Food Panda. They want to work in office or not. That's the thing that they do not realize. There's so much potential in the rural. For example, one of the kampong place that we visited, we engaged with social initiative. They are quite popular with bamboo. So this bamboo used for agriculture sector in Cameron Island. So if you go to Cameron Island, all those bamboos are coming from this place because the bamboo is very thick and very strong. So instead of selling the bamboo as a bamboo, we tell them, we can have, small power of supply. We can make another end product like chopstick, comb, and also maybe in the future they can make it the toothbrush made of bamboo, right? So that kind of downstream thinking that we need to implant because they don't see the potential because they believe all of the opportunities are in the city. So that's how we need to show them that so much potential that they have in the rural area. Other thing like agriculture and aquaculture. So if they do it using traditional way, of course the output will be low. I just need an injection of like machines, methods, and very good marketing of their end product. I mean, in terms of logistics and whatnot, so they really can make money out of it, and grow the local economy of the village or area. So for me, that is the green business, green economy, because we, as much as possible, we want to avoid the competition in certain area, and we do not want, if we talk about food supply and whatnot, we do not want this supply to be interrupted by this kind of activity. So the current generation of doing agriculture, especially in Malaysia, their next generation, I can say this is not like actual study, but from our observation, I don't think their kids, their children are interested enough to continue whatever their parents are doing right now. So soon we're gonna have an issue like now we even have that issue of food supply, because we know, especially in ASEAN, I think 70% or 80% are from smallholder farmers. I mean, like individual farmers with 2 acres land that make production out of agriculture, like rice and other food. So if this kind of group, there's no new generation to replace, to inherit that kind of business activity, there's going to be issue for us later when we have a food shortage, as we are having right now. Like recently we have chicken issue. We need to import 1 million chicken from Thailand and from China, right? So these are issues that we're gonna be facing if we do not do it right. At the end of the day, we cannot look from the green perspective. So the green / environmental, we must look at the social perspective and also the economical perspective. If we can link all these 3 main factors, the product and the service or the business activity can grow on its own.
All right. Thank you, Shahiwan, for sharing that. I think it's a very common practice, especially by larger companies, the whole concept of greenwashing their products. And I think you raised a very important point of how the focus should always be on the product or the business itself. And like you said, the whole concept of it being green should be an add-on. So yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. And I think, again, we can cycle back to Dr. Hoyen at this point. So Dr. Hoyen, what do you think Malaysia can do to promote more entrepreneurial opportunities, especially in the areas of the green economy, sustainability, and the environment? It can be anyone. It could be the public sector, it could be the private sector. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry. So I think it depends on who are we talking about, like you just said, and it depends on, the opportunity depends on like which role that we are talking about. For example, like for governments, perhaps government is the one that doing all this policy maker, and then perhaps they can create and grab the opportunity, for the greener future, especially now we are under like almost like economic crisis now, and recession, I mean. So like, for example, recently the government also announced the carbon neutral target as early as 2050. And indeed, it's a very clear policy direction, even though it's an ambitious target at the same time. And so, but then with this target set, the next challenge is how to implement it. And the policy and measure in realizing this will be very important. Like, for example, the government need to really promote green and include like the incentive or the market-based mechanism, for example, the carbon pricing or RE certificate, to drive the market, so that, to encourage all the businesses to do their part. Because like just one of the speaker just mentioned, we can't just increase the price, but then for the businesses, what they want is actually profit. Nobody will do non-profitable things, So, but then for as an individual, we learn from the pandemic as well, like those new normal behavior change. What have you observed? For example, we grab more food, and once we do it, and then also like not only food, I would say, like also all these online purchase, Shopee, Lazada, all these things. What happened? We create more waste, indeed. And then for example, when we work from home or you study from home, what happened is that electricity demand increased at your home. And so how could we reduce all this consumption? It is all, like when we have an issue, it creates an opportunity for us to think about what are those solutions. So when you have solution, these are actually the so-called business opportunity. This is what I thought. And then, like one of the, I will also say that they are, of course, say it's easy, and we always have different kind of challenges in order to really have the so-called green economy transition. But before I move on more, bear in mind, when we define green, what is green, that the definition of green, because my definition of green might be different from Johan, for example, but for me, it's always, I will think about climate change, which is low carbon. So whatever I consider green, I would consider low carbon. Yeah. And then of course, all these things, look at the in Malaysia, I'm not sure among you all, the knowledge, like I said just now, to what extent the knowledge of climate change that you have. And do you have any idea when I say urgent, how urgent it is? Because in our education system, nobody teach us climate science, and we only learn from internet. And look at the mass media in Malaysia. We seldom report all those climate change related, even like the local TV programs. I think it's not discrimination, but just telling the truth, that myself, I found it that relatively maybe Malay or English programs, there are still more climate change related programs, but compared to the Chinese one, I think it's very few. If have, there's also, from the others country program, but not from the local. And we need more. When I talk about TV program, I'm not only referring to the conventional, but of course, including all this that you can view online, including all the clips, that is very important, because nowadays youth, I think you will be easier influenced by all this, what you can see, visualize. Yeah. And the other thing is, I would say is the fossil fuel subsidy. I think the other two speaker, perhaps, I don't know whether you will agree with me, because of the subsidy, and all these fossil fuels becomes cheaper because of the subsidy, and then it will hindering the fairness of the competition between the renewable energy and the fossil fuel. And if we really take up, the subsidy, maybe we can see that in fact renewable energy can be almost the same price or even cheaper than coal, because we always, the government always thought that because of coal is cheaper, so that is why coal become the dominant energy source. And what you can do as an individual, because when we always blame the government that you're not doing enough, and if the government like right now happening, if we keep on changing the government, the policy keep on changing, the priority keep on changing, at the end we will get nothing. But everything have to start from ourselves. How about you cultivate the behavior change towards low carbon living? Like but of course, you don't become too ambitious, like over the night, I want to use everything, low carbon. I will only buy food that is labeling green. Don't go that extreme, because that you will not be consistent. I just give a very simple example for example, recycling. If I told you like there are a lot of colors, like paper, you go to what color, bottle, you go to what color. At the end, you will like burning. You don't know which way to go. Some of the like for example the Starbucks cup is actually cannot be recycled. But how many of us that really know about that? So it confused. But why not we just do it very simple? Those can recycle and those not recycle. Just 2 bins. It will be easier. So things like that, make it simple, but make sure that you will do it consistently. That will be higher impact to me. Yeah. And then, for example, for personal investment opportunity in your future, maybe now you're just a student, you would not involve that, or you buy things, you can always invest in green fund or green companies, all these things by individual, we can contribute. So, okay, I think I talked too long. So maybe for now, yeah, I'll stop here.
No, not really, Dr. Hoyen. I think you delivered a very comprehensive input on what everyone should be doing, like the roles that should be played by everyone. I think that's what you have emphasized here, be it education since early formative years on the climate, on climate change, on the climate crisis, media awareness, as you succinctly pointed out just now. And I think the most important thing is what we, especially as young Malaysians, do in terms of our consumption and managing our expectations, I would say, not to be very ambitious, as I mentioned, with the whole green wave, but rather, take things step by step. But then again, I think it's also important for us to know what sort of incentives and support measures that are already out there for green businesses in Malaysia. And I think to gain more insights on that, Regine, maybe you could share what sorts of support measures and incentives are there for green businesses like yours as well, that you could share with us today.
Okay, for talking about the green support, I'll talk more about support. So there are a lot of like NGOs, bodies that probably is related to the green accessibility, and then these are we call the support coming from this organization. Perhaps can increase the exposure in the knowledge and also exposure on how the market development in regards to green sustainability and low carbon, etc. So in terms for the incentive from the public and private sectors, I would say that government incentive probably can look into like some startup grant, maybe going for some grant pitching, etc. That is more on the, I think those in the business side, they probably they are more well-versed in this, like you have this competitions to participate, and then eventually it turned into a commercialization business ideas. So they're actually something to start somewhere lah. Yeah. So I would say in terms of like green businesses, I also see that some even started from like participating in like expos or carnivals. There are some states events or government related event that you can actually get the more exposures. Like usually I see in like some of the green carnivals events, you do see new products. And when you see those products, they are pretty surprised, and then that's how the creativity and innovations come in. Like for example, I think Mr. Shahiwan, you mentioned about like bamboo's product, right? So I also recently see that people maybe you have already used the rice chopsticks, the rice straws. So that is something that I would say is a very innovative, and that is really address the to reduce the waste in a very creative way. And this is actually from the creativity and the innovation side, then you turn into business ideas, and and in your entrepreneurship journey. So I think that is how youth today to be I must say you guys are more creative than us last time. Definitely, you have more ideas, you have more technologies, and and this is in the era of this information, the abundance of information, and even as a lot of DIYs, and there are many ways to start from, like that is from your own initiative, and then eventually you bring it up to for market commercialization, commercialize it. You need to get you need to probably study into like the business canvases, and what's the role, what kind of this potential business is going to play in which value chain, etc. So this is some of the considerations that in terms of we will plan it now. Then if eventually you get the support and incentive and whatnot, with all this government pushing, as we can see also in the budget, government actually has specifically mentioned about on the SDGs, etc. So these are some of the ways that you can explore and study further and research further. It could be from there you get the inspiration from it. So like for example, there are a lot of SDGs goals. I think today we're relating the bit to the SDGs goals: sustainability, reducing waste, and then achieve food security in a more sustainable way. So there are many ways that youth today are using their creativity and also their skills in IT, developing out app that cater for this development of the sustainability programs, or maybe eventually you can play some role in this green industry as a whole.
Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you very much, Regine, for sharing all of those. As you had mentioned as well, like there are definitely a lot of support measures out there. But again, whether they are known by the wider public, I think that's another question. So I'm glad that by you mentioning those today, for all those budding entrepreneurs, these are some sort of like measures that they could seek for or apply for when they start their business. And I think since we've been discussing about various aspects of the green economy and youth entrepreneurship within this context, I think this is the perfect time to take some questions from the floor. And our first question for the day is directed to Dr. Hoyen. Since Malaysia is said to be a developing country, will the green economy affect or contradict Malaysia's current economic status? I think if I were to rephrase it, what is the impact of us embracing a more greener economy on our, let's say, our GDP growth rate or like our economic progress? So what are your thoughts, Dr. Hoyen? Dr. Hoyen, I think you're muted. Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. And thank you for the question. And I think the question is the topic of today's panel discussion. So of course, it will not contradict because of course, in the near future, it will feel like we are in the economic recession, and then we are talking about the green, and then we need higher costs, for the green products. Maybe you will have this thought, but look at the future, and also like I have just mentioned just now. So we can do little things, and then it definitely will not contradict with the GDP, because if you go further down, the fossil fuel contribution to our GDP. For example, natural gas, we are actually importing, We are no longer like of course, the LPG we still export, but for the internal use, the domestic, we actually import. So all these things you have to take into consideration. Like for example, oil is already declined a lot. And then coal, we do not have coal. We import. And it's using USD. And do you know the currency right now? How bad is our Malaysia ringgit, So all these things, it is not contradicted if you think further. And you are in the finance background, you know better than me, I'm not. And so your mathematical calculation, all these profit things, you know better than me. And for the future one, of course, I think the other two speakers, they will inspire you more, like how their businesses grow from before that compared to now for the renewable energy, for the solar. We already have all this. Government is not in the process. Maybe it's still very slow, but we are in the process that encourage more. For example, solar panel, the rooftop solar panel, or the large scale solar power plant. We already have programs that encourage the people to go towards there. And of course, with the recent announcement that we have the ambitious net carbon neutral target, that is the policy direction. Of course, I cannot guarantee that how serious the government is going to implement it, but then at least this is make us, you, the young people, to take it serious, and you have the voice. If the government didn't do the right thing, who you want to vote? That is your future. That is your life. How you want yourself and your children live in this planet, livable planet, or you suffer every day that 40 degrees Celsius out there every day. You have to eat food that is processed, which is artificial. No more green, and then the green you can only go to the lab, plant in the lab. And the so-called protein, because of the emission, the methane, you don't eat meat anymore. You artificial, or you eat worms, because worms, there's a lot of protein. Do you want this kind of life? Ask yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Hoyen. I think once again, you delivered another fiery and passionate response to the question. I think next up, we have a question for Shahiwan. How can green business owners align profit generation with environmental sustainability? So how do you make profits if you are having a green business?
All right. Okay. I mean, like Dr. Hoyen said before, any business, their main objective is to make profit, right? Profitability is the main idea. But then for a green business, they should have the second objective. For example, in Sangkrok Solar, of course, our first objective is to sustain financially. And then the second objective that we have is to have increased number of electrification rate, from our own initiative. So we have two objectives. Number one, of course, in ringgit, in cent. And then we have the numbers of, we have provided access to electricity. So that will be our second objective. So both objectives are in the same level. It's not like we prioritize the number one or prioritize the number two, because in the end of the day, business should operate as a business. We need profit to sustain. And then in terms of the environmental green contribution, it should be together with social and economical. Give you another example. So when we started our social initiatives back then, we were thinking how to make the system more sophisticated, we can increase more power consumption and whatnot. But in the end of the day, if they cannot, they are not, cannot afford to pay for the system, pay and also use the system in terms of, background, it will be useless. So we go back to basic. Our target is just to provide them solar powered lights, one light bulb. We've really focused in delivering that solution, and delivering is not only on the technical side, it's also on the financial model and whatnot. And then we try to achieve the best impact from that initiative. So that's the best way, because we cannot try to do all in one time. We just target one objective, make sure it is delivered, it is being utilized accordingly. That's when we realize it's actually more social aspect than technological. If you have very good advanced system, but the beneficiaries or the users do not know how to use it, like I said, it will be useless. So my advice, I said just now, you have one question regarding how to start in green business and whatnot, right? Try to think one problem, one solid problem, just one, and to solve it, that part only. And you must be very, very good at it, or very, very efficient at it. Don't try to do all at once. And I believe during your stage right now, you have a lot of exposure opportunity to mini startup or mini incubator program, where you can verify your ideas. And that's very important. Your ideas, your business proposal must be verified by the anybody else, especially your market. You don't want to be trapped in Malaysia, we call it short sendiri kind of thing, right? You keep building thing, build up, make it more fancy, expensive, and then at the end of the day, actually your market cannot afford to pay for it. It will be very, very useless. So this kind of opportunity need to be grabbed by the youth, because you have so much access, so much access to find what will not work. So you won't find how to make it work, because if it's somebody telling you that they know how to make it work, it will be very big bluff lah. If they know, they will be doing it on their own. So they will share your experience. They say, customer very sensitive like this. They don't want to pay more than RM1 than this price. So that kind of inputs that you need to make sure that your green business proposal or green business venture started at the right pace. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Shahriwan. I think to reiterate, the most important takeaway from what you've shared earlier is focus on being a great problem solver. So it's all about identifying those problems and finding solutions for it. I hope the audience take note of that. I think it's a great advice that applies to all of us, regardless of whether you plan to start enterprise or if you want to pursue an alternate career pathway. All right, the next question is directed to Regine. Environmental careers are less popular when compared to careers like law or engineering. How should green economy gain attention among the youth? Regine? Regine, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, my line interruption. So yeah,
no,
sorry. What was the questions again? Yeah, what was the question again? Sorry. Yeah.
Less popular when compared to careers like law or engineering. How should green economy gain attention among the youth?
How should green economy gain the attention of the youth, is it?
Okay, so basically like careers related, I mean, to simplify this question, right? Basically any careers that are related to environment is not as popular as those mainstream careers like becoming a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. So how do you attract the youth to a career or even starting a business that's more related to the environment and the green economy?
I think it boils down to we are doing something good for the environment, and then that's always the key drive to you care for environment. That is the career that you consider lah. Of course, you with the passion in doing this related, for example, like solar energy, hydros, reducing waste. So in every part of it that you're doing, you are contributing to protect the planet. So again, it relates to the triple bottom line: planet, profit, and people. And green economy, I would like to quote maybe some of the countries. Post-pandemic, we see even countries like Pakistan's, they are employed the unemployed to plant the trees, just take for example. So these are the already some of the measures taken by overseas. And with this, the last so-called COP, so we see that definitely the decarbonization, green economy is actually the way forward for green recovery. It's actually a green recovery. So that's why also in even our government, our country also pledged towards net zero by 2050. So if you think this is something too aggressive, please play your part to actually make this a realizable mission, so that eventually we will reach this target collectively. And this is going to drive and also create a lot of job opportunities. And that is what we see as we go along towards for the past business journeys. So of course, Malaysia, the awareness level is still need a lot of education, to increase the awareness level. So, but we see improvement. Yeah, like mentioned by Dr. Hoyen, we see the progress and also the advancement of this green energy, renewable energy, and for the past 10 years, we already see that. So the next 10 years, we are seeing more and more definitely business-related activities in reducing our carbon emission as one of the key segment. Yeah, this is what we passionately believe lah. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Regine, for sharing a few ways the youth can, I would say, more like align themselves with the whole concept of the green economy, sustainability, despite it not being seen as like the most lucrative for the go-to careers, right? So I think again, yeah, thanks for the input. Our next question is to Mr. Shahiwan again. So Shahiwan, this question is on what are the challenges you faced when you formed your business, and what advice do you have for other young entrepreneurs?
Okay, all right. So, I mean, I started back in 10 years ago, 2010, 2011. Of course, when I started, it was during the era of overnight success, where Facebook, overnight he turned dropout guy to become millionaire, right? So we being sold with that kind of dreams. So it was very nice dream, but it's not reality, right? So for me, when you started your business, I said you must have your very objective. First, of course, to create profit, and the second thing, you must find anything other than financial return. Because why I do say this, if anything happen, during, of course, you will face a lot of, downturn and whatnot. When you have the second objective, so you still feel that you have achieved something. Okay. Honestly, I almost shut down my company back in end of 2017, early 2018, where our cash flow is very, very bad. Was very bad during that time. But fortunately, during that time, we have stocks of solar panel and whatnot. Then I decided to donate, to contribute all these small solar panels to NGOs to bring it to African countries and bring their social initiatives. So fast forward, in mid of 2018, we start to receive calls, inquiries, and show of interest for the solar energy system. So that's how you stay relevant in that market. Let's say if you really rely on the financial return, it will really tear you down. I mean, like becoming very hopeless because you don't see the ringgit coming. So you say you will ask yourself this question: why I'm doing this? That's very, when you ask yourself that question, it means that you really need to reconsider whatever that you're doing. So during that time, when I asked myself that question, I said, at least these solar panels, being utilized by the community who need it. If you are talking about environmental impact, of course, they're using almost clean energy. Social impact, you can imagine for them, I give you a case in Malaysia. For a night, they are spending 2 ringgit for fuel. Fuel can be candle, wax candle, or they can be palm oil, the cooking oil. So they use 1/3 of the 1 liter, 1 kilo palm oil to be used with their lantern. So if you calculate 2 ringgit times 30 days, they are spending 60 ringgit per month. It is like, if you use 60 ringgit for normal TMB, you can get very good supply of light, fan, TV, computer, and whatnot. So actually, let's say it's not about so much when you tackling it from the environmental factor, you don't see this kind of social and economical impact. But when you see the problem first, try to solve it, then you try to look for alternative. It can be green and cannot be green. Another example, I went to Myanmar during 2015. Myanmar electrification rate during that time is 50 to 60%. Means that half of their people don't have access to electricity. So they are really eager to have 100 megawatt solar farm during that time. So when you go in solar farm, megawatt is like how many megawatt that you have is like, very good numbers that you can show off to everybody lah. But being said, I was in that event, I told them straight away, it was not feasible. Might as well you do 10 megawatt power plant powered by diesel, where you quickly utilize, where your people really needs the power right now and generate the income and generate the economy. After that, then you can think of something like solar and whatnot. The issue is, if you have 100 megawatt, you're gonna need very high capital, and then even your infrastructure is not ready for that 100 megawatt during that time lah. Now it's totally different story. So we must be very practical. Identify the problem, how to solve it with very high impact. It can be green, it can be less green, or it can be later green, because we need to solve certain issues very quickly. I'm the solar guy, I'm supposed to sell solar, but some of the problem I can tell you upfront, if it's not practical, if it's not feasible, I will tell you it's not feasible. Because efficiency is the way forward. We do not want to waste some resources just because to fit the green criteria. So that will be my take.
All right. Thank you, Shayuan, for once again giving a very, I would say, honest response to the question, since you personally mentioned how there was one time when your business almost went bust as well, and then how you rebound from that moment. And I think, like, again, you have stressed the need to focus more on the problem, not really of the other factors. And if you are driven to solve that problem, then I think everything else just falls into place eventually. So given the limited time we had for the Q&A session, that was unfortunately the last question we could take for today. Nevertheless, as we reach the end of our session today, allow me to invite each of our panelists to deliver their final message to our young and budding green entrepreneurs among the audience. Kindly keep them within a minute too, given, again, time constraints. So Ho-Yen, would you like to go first?
Okay, Ken.
Yeah.
So I actually mentioned this more than once. Choose the future that we want. Choose the future that you want. And, you know, especially when we still have a choice and before it's too late. And young people out there, climate change is in emergency situation. We need urgent action, including, you know, individual small effort. And in the future, if you becomes the entrepreneur, motivate and inspire your future business partners, you know, service provider, customer for moving towards low carbon living, like what I just said. Now and, you know, future 5-10 years later on, it will be different. You can set, like, for example, procurement, you know, to drive the market. And of course, never easy, but it is not impossible, you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ho-Yen. Regine, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Ho-Yen, but I will say that the passion and also the interest in the green is the way to sustain. Yeah. So if you are in the entrepreneur journey, so it's a different story, I will say that. And then there are ups and downs, and these are the things that will keep you going. And I will say that of course, you were talking about, it's not the so-called the mainstream of the career that probably now at the moment people would think, but I think in the future, this is actually the way of living. Yeah, the way of living. So you can see from green building, green energy, green transportation. So it will be happening in every aspect of our life. Yeah. So that is how hopefully the youth, especially to advocate the youth to pursue in the direction of this green career and industry development, to play your role in reducing the carbon emission, protecting the planet at the same time. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Regine. And last but not least, Shahiwan, what is your final message for the audience?
All right, two messages. First, if you're choosing about career, you can venture into any career actually, and you have to be the change maker. You can be in coal power plant career prospect, but you need, and then if you have the concern for the environmental, you'll be the one to change, because we cannot just simply, you know, dump the coal power plant. You know, we need someone to, you know, thinking of doing the transition. Maybe the coal power plant we can convert to waste to energy kind of thing, something like that, because or else will be wasted. You can imagine of the offshore platform in the ocean, so many platform, how many tons of steel are going to live in the ocean. So we need somebody in the ecosystem, in the environment, to be the change maker, right? That will be if you're choosing something in career. But if you're into venturing in entrepreneurship kind of career path, the time is now. Actually, the time is yesterday. You should start it yesterday. Identify a very good, valid problem. Verify it with other people. Try to find the mistake quickly. Try to find what will go wrong quickly. You will not find what is right. You will find what is wrong first before you will find what is right. So I hope you all understand. It's very, very catchy, tricky situation for me to explain. So all the best to the youth. You are the changer.
Thank you very much, Shahiwan. And I think with all those messages said, it's about time for me to once again thank Dr. Hoyen, Regine, and Shahwani for sharing your insights on the green economy and youth entrepreneurship today. I hope the audience found this discussion beneficial, and I also hope all of you were able to grasp the key takeaways from this session. And for all those budding and passionate green or just any entrepreneurs, you are that one bit more motivated and inspired to pursue your dream and to pursue your business ventures. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us in our first panel discussion of the day. I now pass back the floor to Shalini.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, SNU. Yes. It's been our pleasure to have a few words this morning. I hope the audience enjoyed. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Yohendran, to moderate this session really well. And thank you, speakers, for giving us perceptive comments. It was surely an interesting and informative session to be discussed. And I, along with the audience, have learned a lot. Before we move on to the next session, let's take a lunch break from now on until 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Make sure to come back before 1 p.m., which is around 12:50. If you don't want to miss our next session, which is the call for decent work, a right delayed should not be a right denied. Just provided. And also don't forget to fill the attendance form using the QR code presented or the link via chat box. Thank you, and I will see you guys in a bit.